All right, everyone, welcome back into another NBA DFS video. Going to be giving you guys my favorite plays by each position for this 6-game slate on Sunday. Let's go ahead and get into it. So the point guard position to me is actually pretty loaded on this slate, guys, especially between like Chicago and Utah. So just kind of looking at the starting lineups for both of those squads, we're going to notice that a lot of players are going to be out, which is going to create value for the whole slate, but more specifically for the point guard position. So guys, we take a peek at Chicago versus Miami. Okay, basically the same thing that we saw yesterday from both squads, where they're both still banged up. Trey Jones is going to be out. Josh Giddey's out. Jalen Smith is out. Now you have Kevin Huerter, who could end up sitting here in this game, which to me kind of leads me to thinking Kobe White, who's going to be active in this game, is going to be pretty interesting. On the flip side of that, I think Drew Smith is still a decent value, assuming that Davion Mitchell ends up sitting in that game. That's some news that we are still waiting on. And then we actually take a peek here at Utah, guys. Keontae George is going to be out, which means Isaiah Collier is going to be much more appealing, okay, at the point guard spot. With George out, though, that's going to open up some usage for Nurk and then also Lauri Markkanen, assuming that they're going to be active. So we'll touch on that in just a second. So with that being said, just looking at the 9-to-5 lineup builder, guys, the top value, I think, is going to be Ayo Dosunmu there, projected to get 5.65x. This is going to be predicated on how many minutes he ends up getting. And right now, we didn't project to get 27 minutes. If he ends up getting that, that's going to be a very good spot for him just in general, guys. Now, on the flip side of that, or not on the flip side of that, but another play that we have due to injuries that I really like is actually going to be Isaiah Collier there for Utah. Only projected to get 24 minutes. We definitely need that number to be a little bit higher. If he gets closer to 30 minutes, then he could really go off in the slate. But the game against Utah is a decently high-scoring game at 235 total points. It's a 10.5-point spread. What you're going to notice is that the data doesn't necessarily say he's going to be the best value. I would say we'd want to bump up his fantasy points projection a little bit to ensure that we're going to get some exposure to him. Now, when we're looking at the lineup builder, we will notice that some of the plays aren't necessarily popping up here for the 6-game slate that I would personally love to get to. Again, if Davion Mitchell is going to be active, he's not terrible. I'm kind of expecting him to sit. Like, one of the plays that I want to get to is actually going to be Kobe White. I think Kobe White ends up being a pretty appealing guard play in general. And then just worth calling out, guys, Javon Carter was someone I called out yesterday on the Occupy Fantasy live stream as someone that was clearly too cheap. The question I had is, like, do we even need to play him because of the amount of good value that we had? And the answer is both yes and no. Like, sure, if it helps you to pay it for Jalen Johnson, that was great. And I still think he's a fine play. The question with him is, will he get 20 minutes again? I don't know. You know, if he even gets 15 minutes at the min price, this is clearly too cheap. So if you need to find some value, you can get there. Not necessarily sure we're going to need to do that, though. Then I will say, price tag wise, to me, guys, I don't mind the idea again to Drew Smith. If Davion Mitchell's out, Drew Smith ends up being a very solid value in a very good spot there going against the Chicago Bulls. So guys, yes, Ayo could be used as a shooting guard as well, which is ideally what I'm going to end up doing, especially if we get news that Huerter ends up sitting there. If Huerter plays, I do really think he's a fine option there. Price at 4.6. Had a pretty good game last game while only playing 22 minutes. Obviously, if he ends up playing closer to 30, he looks very appealing there in the spot, again, with all those players being out. But if he sits, then Ayo becomes much more appealing, and so does Javon Carter, just as an FY. Larson here for the Heat, to me, has been someone that, you know, it's been pretty good over the last couple of games, specifically against Chicago. And I really don't mind the idea of kind of riding the hot hand there, again, with all the injuries that both teams have. If Powell ends up sitting, he's going to look much better. If Powell plays, he's not as appealing. But overall, I still think he is someone we could consider, again, assuming that Davion Mitchell does end up sitting. But to me, guys, that's very much an if-then statement. You know, if Powell's out, he's a good play. If Davion Mitchell plays or sits, he's a much better option as well. And then just another guard play that's worth calling out, guys. I don't mind the idea of chasing some upside here with Emmanuel Quickley in a good matchup against Utah. To me, that's a pretty strong matchup. I just don't necessarily think it's a lock and load play. And so with that, let's go ahead and move on into the small forwards. And so obviously there was a trade recently made in the NBA. We don't exactly know what to expect in regards to that changing much here for the Kings. So Schroeder no longer there. And then we have Monk listed as questionable. And then we also know that Russell Westbrook is out today as well, guys. And so theoretically, if Monk is active, guys, that's going to make Monk just a phenomenal play, just as an FY. But to me, this news really reflects DeMar DeRozan becoming a much more appealing play at 7.4. I do think there's a strong chance that we end up getting 40 or so fantasy points out of him, assuming that he plays heavy minutes. And given the fact that this game is projected to stay close, that is something I am fine betting on. Now, ultimately, you could also say, hey, Domantas Sabonis is going to be someone that could really go off, assuming he gets 30 plus minutes. And I would agree with that. The issue is he is priced up enough to the point where we have to think about him as a play. And the issue that I have on the slate in general is that there really isn't any great center plays. I think we have fine center plays. I do want to jump back into the Bulls, guys, and talk about Modest here. He is someone that, power forward wise, I think he's a fine play. Okay, last night, guys, I want to call this out. 8 turnovers in that game. Like, on a normal night, let's just say on a bad night, he would have 4 turnovers or something like that. Having 8 turnovers was crazy. In the last game before that game against Miami, he had 1 turnover. And so I think that's important to call because he did have a better game, had more made buckets in that game as well, more usage as well, 21 points. And if you told me that we're just going to get a base of 35 fantasy points out of him, I'd be okay with that. But with how banged up the Bulls are, assuming that he doesn't have 8 turnovers again, I would say he's going to get closer to 40 fantasy points. And so he's someone I think we should be going out of our way to target there, guys. And then I think Okoro is a fine value play. If another player ends up sitting there for the Bulls, he'd be someone I'd be fine getting to. And then on the flip side of that, I do think we need to talk about both Powell and also Jaquez. So Powell's been a little bit banged up. I don't know if we can necessarily trust him, but Jaquez has been someone that's went off over the past 2 games. And I don't really see why that would change, really. And so I'm fine just kind of going back to the well with both of those plays here. I think he ends up being a very, very solid play for us on this slate. And then for what's worth, guys, kind of sticking with the Bulls, Patrick Williams to me yesterday ended up being a pretty easy click. Ended up getting 34 minutes, which was huge. He's not projected to get that many in this game with Vucevic now being active. Although if we were going to lock in 25 minutes out of him, I still think he'd be someone we'd be going out of our way to target. Now, the issue is that when we look at his minutes, he's only projected to get 17 minutes. So that does make him a little bit more thin. And also, we're going to have to pay up for someone here. I already mentioned Sabonis being a potential pay-up play. I also think you could just be looking at Markkanen as a pay-up play as well for Utah there. Markkanen projected to get 34 minutes, projected to get around 35 fantasy points. We would want him to get more than that, but still, I don't mind the idea of paying up for him. Like per 36 with Keontae George off the court, he does average over 40 fantasy points per 36. So that is a play that we could be looking at there as well. And then, guys, let's go ahead and jump on into the centers. I'm fine getting to Bam if, he's fine. Last game against Chicago wasn't all that great, which was annoying, but I think he's still a viable option. If we're looking for like a value center play, I actually don't mind the idea of getting to Duran Sharp here, guys. He's been productive over the last couple of games with Clowney still out. You would expect him to get right around 18 or so minutes and continue to produce what he has been able to produce. Not locking the play by any means, but my kind of struggle on this slate has been center. Now, I will say, if Yusuf Nurk's going to be active in this game, which it does seem like he is now, he's upgraded to probable, he's going to be the play that we want to go out of our way to target. And so then we're left at 2.4 left over. So obviously we cannot make this lineup work. So the question becomes, where should we find value? Again, I really like the idea of paying up for Markkanen, but in regards to this lineup, I don't know if we necessarily need to. Like if we're already playing Collier and Nurk, then we don't need to play Markkanen. I'm fine playing 2 of them. I just don't know if we need to play all 3 of them. Although against Toronto, we should probably do that. But if we're playing 3 Utah players, we probably want to run it back with someone from Toronto then there as well, because the bet would be on the game to stay close enough, and then we'd run it back. So let's just avoid that situation for now. We'll go ahead and take a peek at the guards again. And let's just go with Monk then in that spot where I'm assuming he's going to be active with all those players out and gone. That's kind of a spot that we ideally would want to get to. And then we have 5.9 left over, guys, to finish out the first build here for you guys. Like someone like Bub Carrington, I guess, would be a fine, okay shoulder shrug play to close out your build. Like I don't love it, but also not terrible. Ideally, I would probably rebuild this build in some capacity, but overall, not a bad base build here for you guys. I will show you guys what the 9 to 5 lineup builders telling us are the top builds, and that'll begin out of here. And so the top lineup right now, guys, would actually be AO, White, Jordan Clarkson. The models like that Clarkson a decent amount. I don't know if we necessarily need to get there. I would rather try to get to Javon Carter at a similar price tag if possible. I'd rather do that. Sabonis, Duran, Hart's fine. He's a shoulder. Modest, and then Monk. Overall, not terrible. Again, I think we'd rather just get to Carter if possible. Again, there are some players where I would bump up their fantasy scores so that we are getting exposure to them. But overall, not a bad start for you guys for the day. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. Appreciate you being here. Good luck with all the lineups that you make today, and hopefully you guys have a good day. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel.